Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on, well, a pretty major deep dive into the cosmic origins of self-realization. We're unpacking the foundational philosophy laid out in Conversations with God, CWG, which provides a kind of grand cosmological roadmap for why we are here and how we grow.
Exactly. And this material isn't just abstract theory. It offers, like, the very architecture of existence. For anyone really dedicated to an inner path, whether it's deep contemplative practice or maybe systems focused on self-discovery, like, say, the Enneagram understanding, this cosmology gives context.
Yeah.
It helps understand why the journey of defining the self is so challenging and yet so fundamentally necessary.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to distill some of the most profound, maybe counterintuitive concepts. Existence, duality, the soul's purpose, and what's the central idea our sources keep kind of hammering home?
It seems to me that the entire universe, in all its staggering complexity, is perfectly calibrated for one singular purpose.
Experience. Right. Everything else just flows from that necessity.
Precisely. So let's start at the beginning, what the sources call the absolute realm, or all that is. This was pure existence, totally unified and complete. Imagine maybe an infinite ocean, but with no waves, no tides, no shores, just stillness.
That sounds like ultimate peace, yeah. But here's the rub, right? The great paradox.
Yes, because it was everything, it had no frame of reference. If you are everything, you can't conceptually know yourself. I mean, you can't know warm without cold. You can't grasp up without down. If nothing exists outside of you.
Then your own existence doesn't really register.
In a functional sense, yes, it becomes non-existent because
Right.
there's nothing to measure it against.
Yeah.
It's like being a single perfect color. You just can't appreciate its shade until you place it next to others.
Okay. So to solve this ultimate existential problem, the whole made a choice that changed everything. Division. And crucially, it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some kind of fall from grace. It was presented as the greatest act of creative love.
It really was. The whole pole decided to run, well, an internal experiment, splitting itself into infinitely many parts. The intention was that each part, looking back at the rest, could then define and recognize its own grandeur through contrast, through difference.
And this single act created space, time, and relationship all at once.
Yep. And here's where the language is really vital. This division immediately created relativity. We often think of relativity just in terms of physics, like how fast or slow something moves compared to something else.
Right, Einstein and all that.
Exactly. But in this context, it's much broader. It's fundamentally about relationship. Relativity is described as God's greatest gift because it allows the individual soul, you, me, everyone, to define itself in relationship to that which it is not.
Okay, that makes sense. Defining by contrast.
And that leads us directly into the fundamental structural pattern of reality. Because the initial division didn't just create separation, it created a structure for relationship.
Right. And we often default to thinking in terms of duality. Two opposing things, good, bad, light, dark. But the sources highlight a deeper structure, the three elements, or what they call the triumvirate reality.
So when the whole divided, it created this and that, the two polarities, the opposites we recognize. But crucially, it also created the essential space between.
Ah, the space between. That sounds significant. It's not just empty void.
Not at all. It's the field of potential. It's the context. It's the nothing that actually sustains the everything. If you think of a relationship, right, the two people are this and that, maybe. But the relationship itself, the space of interaction and connection, that's the third element. That space, that potential for connection, that is the divine pattern found everywhere in, well, the sublime realms.
And we see this mirrored, as the sources suggest, in the metaphysical structure we might recognize theologically, knowing like the Father, the original understanding.
Lord's concept.
Experiencing like the Son, the manifestation in form, actually doing it.
The actions of being in the world.
And being the Holy Spirit, maybe, the essence that holds and connects the knowing and the experiencing. True being only really happens when conceptual knowledge gets paired with actual physical experience.
And it's really vital to differentiate this structure. The sublime relationship is triune. It includes that binding, generative space between its one parts. But the moment this reality manifests in our material world, it becomes the overt relationship, which is always dualistic. Up, down, light, dark, here, there. The moment you measure something, you create two poles.
Which kind of begs the question, if division created the framework for relationship, what was the very first, most foundational relationship we experienced psychologically?
That takes us directly to the bedrock of human emotion and motivation. Love and fear. In the metaphysical creation, love being the ultimate reality of the whole required its absolute opposite to be experienced.
Wow. So the very first thing created in the conceptual universe that wasn't pure unity was fear.
Yes. Fear is simply the conceptual opposite of love. It's the realization of potential separation, the possibility of not love. Our sources state pretty clearly that every single human thought, every action, every decision, whether it's huge or tiny, stems from one of these two root emotions, love or fear.
So all the other emotions we feel, joy, sadness, anger, peace, they're just derivatives.
Derivatives, yes.
Yeah.
Reactions to our perceived closeness to or distance from love. You know the idea.
That puts a completely different spin on the concepts of good and evil, doesn't it? It suggests these polarities aren't like moral judgments handed down by some external force, but necessary functional mechanics, part of the design for a universe built for self-experience.
They are functional, exactly. And as the human mind tries to grapple with these huge cosmic events, we naturally translate this polarization into narratives, the myths of good and evil, angels and demons. We create stories to rationalize these powerful polarizing forces that the soul intrinsically understands, but the mind just can't quite grasp logically.
So, in that light, the creation of fear was actually an incredibly loving act, because it enabled love to be actualized, to be experienced.
That's the perspective offered, yes.
Right.
It enabled the experience of love in material form.
Okay. Which brings us to our individual purpose. So after the initial divine division, God divided itself into countless small souls. And the key here is that each soul retained the full essence and creative power of the whole.
Like a hologram.
Exactly like a hologram. You are not just a piece of God, you are God miniaturized, holding the blueprint for the entire universe within you.
And how do these miniature gods experience themselves?
Through the material universe. This point is really crucial. Materiality is presented as the only way to convert conceptual knowledge into experiential knowledge. Knowing you are creative is one thing. Standing in front of a blank canvas and actually creating something, that's different. That's experience.
Let's elaborate on that concept of necessity. Why can't we just know our divinity? Why do we need to, struggle through a physical life? Well, because conceptual knowledge is passive, isn't it? Experiential knowledge is active. It's embodied. If you want to know what it means to be fast, you first have to experience what it means to be slow. If you want to know yourself as generous.
You need the chance to be selfish and choose not to be.
Precisely. You must have the opportunity, and maybe even the temptation, to be selfish. The material world provides the resistance, the contrast, the friction necessary for definition.
So the material world is like the perfect laboratory for self-definition, okay? But to make that creation genuine, the soul chooses something that seems totally counterintuitive: forgetfulness.
That's the ultimate paradox of incarnating, isn't it? Upon entering the physical body, the soul chooses to temporarily forget its true divine nature. And this forgetfulness, this is the very definition of free will, according to the source.
Wait, hang on. Why is that necessary? If I already knew I was a divine, perfect being, wouldn't I still have choice?
You'd have theoretical choice, perhaps, but not genuine choice under, let's say, pressure. The sources are quite clear on this. You experience yourself as a divine being with complete choice in the act of choosing to be part of God.
Not just being told you are.
Exactly, not just remembering you are. If you consciously remembered that you were literally the creator of your reality, every choice would simply be an inevitable step toward perfect expression. There'd be no real fear, no drama, no perceived possibility of failure, and thus no true self-creation. The moment of forgetting is the moment of genuine risk, and because that risk, it's the moment of genuine self-power.
I see. Okay. The feeling that we might actually fail, that we might actually be separate, is what gives our choice weight, makes it meaningful. So the soul's primary mission here isn't learning something new, but remembering.
Precisely. It's reconstituting the memory, like putting the members of the body back together, piece by piece, utilizing the experiences of duality, the good, the bad, the contrast, to fully realize oneself while in physical form.
And this isn't about acquiring new doctrines or beliefs.
No, it's about accessing inherent truth, which is why the greatest teachers throughout history, they haven't really given us new laws, have they? They have simply acted as reminders, helping others remember their own divinity that's already within them.
This concept is illustrated so powerfully in that parable of the little soul, which really shows how profoundly interwoven all our paths are.
Yes, it's a beautiful illustration. Imagine a soul who wants to experience the quality of forgiveness, just pure, unconditional forgiveness. Well, in the absolute realm, there's nothing to forgive. everyone is perfect love.
Right, no contrast.
So for the first soul to experience this quality experientially, another soul described as a special angel of God has to volunteer. They have to step forward and agree to create the opposition.
They volunteer to be the villain in the story, the one who makes the mistake, the one who needs forgiveness. Wow. So that soul takes on the difficult role of embodying the not sublime for a time, just so the other soul can achieve its highest expression of forgiveness.
It's presented as the ultimate act of service. And it emphasizes that in the absolute reality, there are no victims, only creators participating in a joint creation. Every person in your life, your adversary, your greatest love, even the stranger on the street, is participating in the creation of your self-definition, offering you contrast.
So in this model, even the person we view as our greatest adversary is actually performing a profound service for us, offering us the resistance necessary to fully define who we choose to be in response. That is a radically different lens through which to view conflict and judgment.
It really is. And that reflection brings us to maybe the most vital application for daily living, the divine dichotomy. If we're to live gracefully in this kind of universe, we have to master the ability to hold two seemingly contradictory truths at the same time.
Okay, let's clearly define those two truths again. Truth one exists in the relative realm, the world of our everyday experience. Good and evil, right and wrong, they exist and they must be differentiated. We need to choose.
Yes, we need to make choices based on our highest understanding of the moment. And truth two exists in the absolute realm, the world of ultimate reality. Everything is one, everything is ultimately love, and nothing is inherently bad or wrong in the grand cosmic sense. Everything serves.
And most people struggle immensely here, don't they? They try to force reality into just one box or the other. If they only embrace truth one, they can become judgmental, polarized, maybe even self-righteous.
Definitely. And if they only embrace truth two, they risk becoming passive, maybe indifferent to suffering, thinking, oh, well, it's all perfect anyway.
Finding that balance seems key.
It takes, well, enormous maturity to hold the tension of the divine dichotomy. We are required to act decisively in the relative world, to choose kindness over cruelty, for instance, while simultaneously remembering that the cruel act itself served a cosmic purpose, providing the necessary contrast for us to define and choose kindness. It's tricky.
So when we face significant challenges, whether they're minor daily frustrations or what we might call calamities, personal strife, social conflict, global crises, how does the soul apply this knowledge? What do we do?
The instruction is profound. Bless the not sublime. This is presented as the highest form of self-mastery. Every situation, no matter how difficult it appears, is a blessing because it is a necessary counterpart for experiencing the sublime. That challenge isn't a punishment handed down from on high.
It's a tool.
It's a mechanism,
Yeah.
a tool for our own self-creation. It just reflects the rhythmic movement of life, swinging from one necessary pole to the other.
So we have to stop viewing friction as failure and start seeing it as fuel.
Precisely. Friction defines us. Think about resistance and weight training. The difficulty is literally what creates the strength. The calamity, the conflict, the pain. That's the resistance that gives us the opportunity to decide, who do I choose to be in the face of this?
And that choice is the definition of God in formation through us.
Yes, that choice made moment by moment.
Wow, this brings the whole cosmic story right down to our relationships, our choices, right here, right now. The final thought here seems to be the profound simplicity that underlies all this complexity. Life is simply the process of God creating and then experiencing that creation. And we are the hands, eyes, and hearts through which that creative evolution takes place. We're participants.
We are constantly co-creating our reality, and the most empowering part of this whole model, I think, is the immediacy of our power. We are always, in every single moment, creating what God is. The world simply follows your idea of yourself. You are the template for the divine expression right here on Earth.
That puts the responsibility firmly back in our court, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
Yeah.
You were told that you had nothing to learn here, only to demonstrate what you already know. So, considering the dualities you face today, the perceived good and the challenging bad in your own life, what aspect of your highest self are you actively choosing to remember and express in this very moment?
Are you choosing love, forgiveness, patience, courage?
Exactly. That choice, right now, that is your sacred work. That's the point of it all.